You mentioned Dan Lanning. I, I appreciate your perspective on saying that he's going to stay, the continuity. I remember when the Alabama job
Mhm.
came open and like he put out a press release being like, I'm not going anywhere. And I'm like, that's really good for Oregon and really bad for the rest of the Big Ten. Cause he's really brought that Georgia mentality in a sense of, hard nosed football. I think Mario Cristobal was doing that a little bit before he
Mhm.
left. Um, but talk more about what Dan Lanning has meant for Oregon and how he's elevating them right now.
First of all, back to that hype video of him saying the grass is dang green in Oregon, which was so good. Not only that, but there was also the flip where it's like the rumor was Dan Lanning was going to Alabama, sure thing, and all of us Duck fans, a lot of the Duck fans accepted it. Most of us weren't even necessarily mad because you're like, it's Alabama,
Yeah.
it's Alabama. Nick, you're replacing Nick Saban, but for him to do that, and all these Washington fans were making fun of us, and then for it to completely switch, and for finally their coach to, oh, it was so great. But Dan Lanning specifically, I mean, back in the day, even with our most success that we had before Dan Lanning with Chip Kelly, recruiting was always something like, because we were being so innovative on the field and because we were getting so much out of the lower stars that we were recruiting, like getting like 3-star offensive linemen and really developing them and turning them into like, a totally working offensive line for that system. But still not getting, I mean, winning some recruiting battles. Like I'm wearing a, DeAnthony Thomas shirt right now, but not winning the amount of battles that like we are now to truly build elite depth. And Scott Frost, who was like the OC during a lot of that time, he even like publicly said, he's like, look, like recruits don't want to come to Eugene, like saying it out loud, which seems very idiotic in retrospect.
Nebraska fans may have just died a little inside when you
Yeah,
said that.
exactly. And him just, and really all of us just kind of accepting, like, yeah, I guess not. And don't get me wrong, I know like NIL's playing a huge part of this. Also, truly don't care. Again, we need that one natty. Don't care if we have to buy it. But
Yeah.
what Dan Lanning has done, just establishing as a young guy that he's like, I'm here to stay. I understand the potential that this place has with the Phil Knight Nike money, the Nike connection, with the recent trajectory of like all the coaches before him of like the Chip Kelly era, even what Cristobal did with recruiting. Like Lanning inherited kind of a wonky roster, like it definitely needed
Mhm.
some repairing in key parts, but overall, like a talented in the trenches, which is what Cristobal was best at. Lanning has
Yeah.
been the best at roster management and managing the coaches that he brings in. Like recruiting the recruiters has been a
Yeah.
huge part of his game plan. Now, the only thing that we have right now, which is what you could say about a lot of, like, I'm talking to Ohio State fan. I know what I'm talking about. He's not winning the biggest crucial games against
Mhm.
rivals so far. But sometimes, I mean, we lost to Washington the last 3 times by 3 points each time. Like sometimes it's just
Yeah.
flipping a coin and you didn't get it that time, but we couldn't be happier with him. Seemingly just a young coach, so much energy, and knows. I think it's that combination that we were talking about before we hit record, of not afraid to go and find the elite talent. Like once you get on the Oregon
Mhm.
roster, he's trying to replace you with somebody better. That is what he tells the people coming in. And so he's
Yeah.
not afraid to get the elite transfer talent that he believes he needs, but also knows you need to be developing these key spots, especially like at O-line. You can't be taking in 3 starter O-lines. Like that can
Mhm.
that can be disastrous. Like seemingly knows how to actually build it up in the way that you should be traditionally.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like, you know, I'm it sounds like what you are helping maybe the rest of the Big Ten understand is that what Dan Lanning has done, everybody will, you know, joke about Phil Knight and the Nike money. right? Like, of course they're going to recruit well with that.
Got a Phil Knight bobblehead here. Rescue it.
That's awesome. For those of you listening, not watching on YouTube, legitimately, it is a Phil Knight bobblehead that Adam has. It's great. But what Dan Lanning has done is he's actually provided the stability and actually given the belief that maybe other coaches did not have or didn't give, which makes a lot of sense. And even, Chip Kelly, who I know is someone who did a lot at Oregon to really innovate beyond Mike Bellotti. Chip Kelly is a lot of things. A recruiter is not one of them.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've talked about. And actually, I don't know if you've connected with Hooligan over at the Sound the Siren podcast.
Yeah. I've met him in the past. Yeah.
It wasn't Hooligan. It was Kevin from the Bruin podcast, UCLA. I'm like, Chip wasn't at Washington. What am I doing? Kevin was mentioning that, UCLA, he did not recruit at UCLA, didn't really want to. Dan Lanning is like, I want to recruit. I'll attack the portal. And it sounds like that mix of the resources, but also really the belief, really has Oregon at the precipice of something that maybe we haven't really seen before.
I agree. I agree with all those, including the fact that I'm not sure how much Chip Kelly likes football, like in theory. I'm not sure how much he likes like the people he has to interact with to get the football going. But I mean, as OC though, a pretty smart pickup, I got to say. Like,
yeah,
I get what you're doing. Yeah.
As long as he doesn't have to recruit, then yes.
Yeah.
That's, if we can send all the, I guess, 20 other people to recruit.
Yeah.
So we'll send Brian Hartline. He can recruit everybody. We can have 50 wide receivers.
Well, I mean, it's Ohio State. I assume it just kind of recruits itself. I don't know.
That's well, you'd think, but offensive line is not one of those strengths right now. Yeah, but that's neither here nor there. Speaking of recruiting, you guys have been recruiting at historic levels. I think you already, referenced Phil Knight, right? But is it just Phil Knight? Is it just the money? Is it just Dan Lanning? Like what else can you attribute this to?
Well, I definitely think it's like the fact that he is young and is so willing to be like he's not one of those coaches going out there being like, NIL's hurting the game, man. Like he is so fully ready. And, I think, so much of this is behind closed doors, but it appears that it's not necessarily like Oregon has the quote unquote most money to spend. It appears they were the most ready day one to roll this system out and to like provide the bag. So I know that is the lubricant getting all of this going and to convince people, I'd like to live in Eugene, Oregon for a little while, beautiful place, but we're getting people from all over the country that maybe, never even heard of it. But I do think a huge part of it is that the specific, we're not really losing too many coaches, like individual spots, except Carlos Lachlan. But
we've liked him a lot, by the way. But
yeah.
And you guys got a good running back coach beyond
that's right
too.
I really Samples. I really have dug him. I loved him, what he did at Arizona State. And again, like Arizona State, I think because I really believe he's such a good general manager, really, Dan Lanning, because all of these coaches he's getting, like Kenny Dillingham was such a young guy, like what was he, like 21 years old or whatever? No, not really, but he was so young as an OC. It proved to be a great hire. And like Arizona State, he immediately goes over to Arizona State, and I think he's going to do good. I mean, it's going to take a long time for them to dig out of the hole of Herm Edwards, but I think that proved to be a really smart young hire. Will Stein, it was again just like the perfect person to follow him, to get a lot of those like offensive like prospects that were maybe on the fence, like Will Stein is doing so many similar things. And I think especially offensively, which is where we're getting so much of our best talent and we're getting the most out of it. I think it's just like players like a Dylan Gabriel, especially after Bo Nix, who's like, I just saw Bo Nix go from a laughing stock, a meme of how he was nothing, to a literal Heisman contender. And I think it's because I mean, really, you could probably boil every single thing down to football into they care about the lines. And once you start winning that battle, recruiting wise and developing wise, every single thing in your life is going to get better. That's what it feels like. Like receivers want to play for you because you got a good offensive line, which got you the good QB, and then like the defense wants to play for a winning team, like I truly believe it. Yeah.